Greetings, YouTube friends. The April episode of Astro TA Macro was titled Market Turning Points Ahead, and that played out with precision. The U.S. equity markets made a major cycle low on March 30th, right inside our pivot window. I did expect a little more volatility than we got, but instead April gave us a powerhouse V-shaped recovery. So the key question for May now is simple. Does this rally have more fuel, or are we approaching a turning point? Let's get into the Astro, the TA, and the macro signals. Welcome to my friends, Blair, from the creator of Time Trades, Dale, trader and coach from TradeGate Hub.
Nice call on the market last month, Margo.
Thanks, Dale. And Jared, macroeconomist from the Trade Travel Chill community. All right, let's jump in.
Okay.
Yeah, so how's your April, Dale?
Sweet because of sugar. Okay.
That was
I'm not sure if we talked about it on the last monthly show or we talked about it when you and I were together, but it's had a real nice run. I see cocoa lit up, and I've been thinking about what you've been saying about the grains, that they're in a transition and there'll be better buying opportunities in June or July. So I've been thinking about it, watching the action, and I've really lightened up. And the softs, just like there's rotation in the market between sectors, it happens in commodities. So they've rotated into things like coffee, cocoa, and sugar. And they're all powering ahead. So I think food in general is in an embryonic bull market, but just like is it right to be in financials or tech or oils? You still have to be selective.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I love that your quote of an embryonic bull market for ag and food. I think I quoted you on Twitter because I think it's a huge focus of my thesis going forward. But because it's an embryonic bull market, that means we can think about, for long-term investors and longer-term positions, we can think about building those positions. But as far as our trades go, we're going to probably want to be in and out of that, because I think that the risk-on markets are still, they're still moving up. And I think we may still have a parabolic phase of that yet to go. So,
okay. Well, I was thinking your timing on your cycles would come into play. There's a super El Nino developing off the coast, and been around long enough to see what can happen in the Midwest under El Nino conditions. And that's going to be the growing season. So I think that's going to be critical if they have not a lot of rain and a lot of heat.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could just jump in and get started with wheat real quick. I have a forecast analog, and I actually didn't prep that for the first chart here, but let's just pull it up because I think it's a great topic of conversation. I have an analog that I'm tracking on wheat, and it does support the thesis of a buying opportunity, but also, the thing I'm keeping in mind here, let's see, here we go, it's over here. There we go. The thing I'm keeping in mind is that two things. Wheat and grains can really move erratically, right? So of course, people should be cautious trading it if you've never traded it before, because it really can move. It tends to have these really big up moves and then swings back down. So obviously here we pierced support and that was a rejection. So we've come back down. I think that this tightens up, which is a lot of times what we see after we get a big parabolic move up, right? Then we see a tightening range form before a breakout. But the thing, I was talking to a friend of mine and he was a little concerned he had missed the ag move. And so something I just thought was useful to share with everybody is to zoom out actually to the monthly chart.
Yeah, just starting.
And let everybody know that I don't think anybody's missed it yet. I think this is just the beginning, like you said, the embryonic phase. So I'm personally, looking on at building out a longer term position trade type portfolio that has ag as a key component in it. That's something that I don't have it fully built out yet. I'm working on it. But as that comes together, I usually share individual ticker names with my Discord group and let them know what I'm watching. But yeah, that's what I'm keeping an eye on for the ag commodities right now. And your sugar trade was great. Just I actually trade this ticker here, the ETF. Yeah. And look at that double bottom straight up off the low. Such a good one.
There's a third drive. It took out stops by about 10 cents, 10 ticks. And well, maybe Kane didn't, but sugar did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a line there that I showed. Again, take something off the table if you bought it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Blair, what was your top trade of the month last month?
Oh, well, before I do that, I want to talk about wheat. I want to pile on to the wheat thesis. So,
Right.
yeah, and I think I tweeted this one out, but it's worth going over again. Here's a 15-day chart of wheat with one planetary line. That's it. This is an offset north node. Okay. So we've configured this using 360-degree cycles. Okay. And each 360-degree cycle is $18 high. And the whole thing starts at the IPO price of 122.85. And what I find interesting about this is just how good these mean north node planetary lines are at providing major support and resistance levels. Like it kind of stair stepped down the whole way. Things kind of slowed down around the cycle reset a little bit. But then when it broke out over this descending line over here, that was definite confirmation of that move up. Okay. And there's a couple things I look for when I look at these planetary lines. One is the cycle midpoint here where the lines cross. Okay. And that was basically the low. Okay. So this tells me that we've got the right cycle on the chart. And that by extension tells me that any sort of close above this rising mean north node line would tell us that maybe we've advanced beyond the embryonic phase and we're into like, I don't know what's after the embryonic phase, but the
childbirth.
Okay, here we go.
Third trimester infant.
Oh, yeah, Margo knows
baby
better
bull
than that.
calf birth market.
All right, well, okay. So when's your next major low due with this work, Blair?
Next major low. I'm just being patient, and
Okay.
I'm buying now with long-term view, right?
Right.
Looking out into 27. So I'm not trying to finesse this. I suppose I could at lower time frames.
Yeah, it's probably smart.
Yeah,
You don't know how many long-term winners I trade myself out of.
Yeah.
Because you think you're going to be able to buy the next pullback, and you get distracted. That's why you always leave a piece on, right? But yeah, we think that sometimes because we could hit things fairly accurately that I know it's going to pull back 50 cents. Why don't I just get out, buy the break, and then you're not paying attention and it happens. And sometimes you're looking for that pullback and it doesn't happen. At least I've improved. And let me ask you guys if you did it. So you're looking for a place to buy or sell a market. And I'm only bringing it up because I know everyone has done this. So say, for example, wheat. So say you think there's going to be a 50-cent break from here or 40. So instead of waiting for it, you say, well, why should I wait for it? I think I'll get short for this correction. And that wasn't the trade. The trade is you'll buy it if it gets there, but you extrapolate it into, well, I may as well ride it. Raise your hand if you've ever done that.
Oh, sure.
Because I guess I'm, you
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely.
but it took years. I go, well, that's not really the trade, Dale. The trade is where do you want to buy it? Where do you want to sell it? Not the in-between stuff to try and trade it because, it may not happen.
I totally agree with you. I feel like the longer I've traded, the less I trade actually, and the more
Yeah.
successful I am. And
Tom Petty.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I have a whole astrological thesis about that based on the New York Stock Exchange natal chart that would be a topic for another conversation. But essentially, the planet that rules trading and markets is Mercury. And in the New York Stock Exchange natal chart, Mercury is conjunct Algol, which is the fixed star that is correlated to losing your head. And and all those planets are ruled by Venus, and Venus likes a fair deal. And Venus likes longer term investing. Venus is patient, right? And so if you are patient, you are rewarded. If you are impatient, you will lose your head and perhaps your account while you're at it.
Happens.
But yeah, that's my astrological insight for everybody.
Yeah, besides trade, sometimes we have to hold the mirror up so that people can learn to avoid landmines that they would probably go through if they're just doing the random walk. You know what I mean?
True.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. So I never really answered your question, Margo. Best trade of the month. I'll show you now that I've done the week digression into birthing of baby bulls.
Ethereum.
Ethereum, you called it. You called it. Yeah, Dale, we were all over this one. So this is
you called this out in the last episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were both on it. And back to our last conversation, I with my bullish bias, I've only been trading this on the long side.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the latest little science project that's part of time trades. Is these little blue boxes are called entry zones, and these indicate areas of likely reversance. So what I'm looking for in these blue boxes is just divergences, the kind of stuff that you learn on day one of trading, right? Is just look for divergences. And here's my personal favorite divergence indicator. It shows the number of ATRs above or below the 21 EMA. And you can see let me just zoom in here to this one, because this was my best trade of the month. It was a pretty low stress 40% with zero adverse excursion, zero drawdown. So we can see the spike lower in price, confirmed by the ATR EMA indicator here, and then there's higher lows over here, and then off to the races. So and then we did the same thing in reverse to get the top, lower highs in the ATR EMA, and then I think I exited over here. So this whole thing worked out just really, really well. It was a nice low stress. I think it was like 40-ish% with 15 or 20x on Ethereum futures.
Nice.
I've never seen the ATR used as a momentum indicator before. And it really is, right? The average trading range could also give you divergences.
Mm-hmm.
That they're compressing or expanding will tell you by whether they're confirming the prior high or low, right?
Exactly, and I like it because it's kind of it's dynamic. It adapts to kind of current market conditions and bar sizes, and of course the way the ATR is defined, it accommodates for gaps and stuff like that. Yeah, it just makes it really, really easy to read. So this 3 up here, this is 3 ATRs above the 21 EMA, and -3 is 3 ATRs below the 21 EMA. And yeah, things get interesting when you touch it. One of the things I found in reading this is that after the first touch of +3, often there's two more spikes. So this kind of gets me into exit mode. And then by the time we see the third lower top, it's like I'm out. I'm punching out up here. So it's got a very clean and easy to read behavior. I tend to prefer it over RSI and composite index and stuff like that.
Nice trade.
Yeah, very cool. I love that indicator. You introduced me to it, and I've just been adding it.
Yeah, and this is the most recent entry zone from the past weekend. Similar behavior, right? We see the spike lower, and then you see the higher lows in the ATR while it treads water sideways, and then it blows off. The exit wasn't anywhere near as clean. Got a big drop without the nice lower highs on the ATR. So yeah, that one was not the trade of the month. But yeah, anyways, I do like the entry zones because it identifies this fixed period of time. They occur about once a week, and you can just dust off the old divergence playbook. And this is an area of time where divergences tend to work better than other areas of time. So anyways, that's the latest science project from my side, applied to profitable trading.
Awesome. Well, shall we jump into the events of May and what we're all looking at going forward?
Sure.
Well, so I'll just kick it off with a little bit of astrology without taking anybody too deep down the rabbit hole. So last month, the event that really dominated was when we had from the geocentric perspective, which is from our perspective here on Earth. Well, actually, let me back up just for anybody who's newer. So there's different ways of viewing the planets in the sky from an astrology perspective. One is called geocentric. That's from Earth's view. And we look up and see where the planets are from Earth in the sky. And so from Earth, you see the sun, and that'll show up there on the chart. You can also zoom out and look at where the planets are relative to the sun. So from the sun's view in the middle of the chart, so this is a heliocentric chart here. The sun is in the middle, and this is where the planets are relative to the sun. So from the sun's perspective, you see the Earth, right? Now, I use both geocentric and heliocentric astrology. I think that they're both relevant, and I also look at financial astrology from two different perspectives. You've got technical financial astrology, which is measuring time cycles and exact pivots and when strong moves are due and what sort of patterns you see on the price chart. And then there's interpretive financial astrology. And I think the interpretive financial astrology lays kind of the narrative or the background. And then you build the technical on top of that. And so for me, when I'm looking at the narrative or the interpretive financial astrology, I like to look at heliocentric charts as the inner reflection of what's going on internally inside, whether that's inside the markets, inside the collective, or inside a human being, a person. And then I look at the geocentric charts as the ground on which we're going to play that out, right? Because we live here on Earth. So heliocentric events take place at different times, a lot of them, than geocentric events. So last month in April, we saw whatever we were all calling in the astrology world an Aries pileup. So we got a bunch of different planets in many more planets than we've seen since 1900, all in the sign of Aries, including the luminaries at the new moon in April. And that created an enormous amount of ignition energy. And I did talk about this in the April episode. And I didn't quite foresee that ignition energy was going to actually just launch us on, this massive run. I knew we were going to move up, but I didn't see it as like just this huge V-shaped recovery, which it did produce. So now those planets from our perspective here on Earth are separating, but from the heliocentric perspective, from the sun's perspective, they're actually just getting into Aries. So the Aries pileup is just starting from the heliocentric perspective, which is interesting. So we got that major exertion of energy on the front end. And now we're going to see first today, let's see, yesterday, May 4th was the heliocentric Mercury-Mars conjunction. Heliocentric Mercury made its ingress into Aries, and that is a very tradable technical financial astrology setup. That is correlated to weekly pivots and daily and weekly pivots in Bitcoin. So that's one of the reasons that I'm looking for a Bitcoin pivot high to manifest this week. I always give everything plus or minus 1 week, but usually it happens within 5 to 7 days. Sometimes it even happens the exact day of. And then that those pivots also can manifest sometimes in the NASDAQ as well, but not with quite as much reliability as you get in Bitcoin. And then tomorrow we have heliocentric Mars, it's today. I'm 1 day off. Today's the 5th. So by the time everybody sees this, this will have already taken place. But basically, we've got Mercury, Mars, Neptune, all forming conjunctions over the course of this period of time. It's a lot of energy. We've seen strong moves up in the market the last couple of days. And then all that energy, the Mercury, Mars are going to run into Saturn, and Saturn is sitting at 6 degrees Aries. So I think that we may start to see a little bit of a slowdown, because Saturn represents boundaries or restrictions at times. It can also be manifestation, but definitely Saturn requires you to slow down and follow the rules a little bit. So that's kind of, I saw this week. So I do these forecasts. I do monthly webinars for my Discord members a little earlier than we get these out on YouTube. And so this week was a major hot zone, because if anybody's been following along, I seem to identify these hot zones that we have in the month. So we had this week, and then the next one that's really important is the week of the new moon, which is, yeah.
Before you go off that chart, another thing I noticed is our friend Venus is closing in on Jupiter there.
It is.
So
and, yes,
I would interpret that as bullish in my non-astrologer mind. Is that correct?
It can be. Typically, the Venus-Jupiter conjunction is favorable for wealth and finances. And that is going to take place on the 7th. And so one of the interpretive pieces that I have on this is, from the geocentric perspective, we just had the Jupiter Mars square. And what I was forecasting along with that was like, we're going to see a bunch of exaggerated, conflict and threats, basically, from, the war scene from Trump and whatnot. And we did see that, but I think you could also interpret that to have something to do with this as well, because that Venus-Jupiter conjunction is going to be at the Anoretic degree of Cancer, and Cancer rules homeland and defense. And so that conjunction is going to take place still with Mars hanging out in orb of a trine. And so you've definitely got a lot of warrior energy and homeland defense energy coming in from both geocentric and heliocentric perspectives. And so that's why I was anticipating escalation this week. And, it may just be a lot of hot air. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell in this current conflict what's hot air and what isn't, But for the markets, I'm definitely watching that heliocentric Venus-Jupiter conjunction on the 7th. And Venus rules copper. So copper is definitely something that I've been keeping my eye on as well.
You like
that aspect's going to be...
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that aspect on the 7th is going to get followed. The next day, on Friday the 8th, is your biggest macro scheduled item of the week, U.S. non-farm payroll.
Right. That's interesting. And, I remember, Jared, we talked about this when we were in the Discord doing the AMA webinar. There's a lot of Pluto's also stationing stationing retrograde on the 6th in the 6th house over New York City, which the 6th house rules labor. So that's interesting to see. Pluto is going to be kind of coming to a halt there in the 6th house over New York City. What's your take on the result of that? Or do you have any forecast on that, Jared?
I don't have any forecast personally. The consensus right now is estimating 64,000 jobs positive. But if you go back the last 2 months, we had a similar estimate last month. big upside surprise on that labor number. But in the prior month, in February, it was a negative, I think 33,000 jobs. So again, question is how reliable are the actual numbers? But what I will say, since we already talked about Ethereum and crypto highly sensitive to non-farm payroll. When I look back this year, three out of the four reports we've had this year for non-farm payroll, Bitcoin moved a little bit more than 2.5%, two times more than 3%, and one time didn't do anything. So could be a market mover for crypto.
It's interesting. That would not have been on my bingo card.
Yeah, it might be and Margo's looking for a peak. I could show our viewers why.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so, you guys remember I was right from the bottom on Bitcoin. I'll admit I did not ride the whole ride, but back then, I was come up with targets. So I know what the RR is on the trade. So back in January when we bottomed, I had this weekly breakdown of a head and shoulders formation. Okay, so we're about to test it. And I think that the low is in, but this could be where we get a pullback, maybe 50% to, maybe back to 70. But I think we're going to blow to new highs this year.
You think that'll take place this year?
Yeah.
Interesting.
With the market, I think it's going to be, we may get a pullback. I know you disagree. I still think that there could be a little fear and meaning a little risk off. And, I'm pretty negative the euro.
Yeah.
And, I'm looking for a decent dollar rally. I'm looking for the euro to trade under 114. I'm actually looking for long term. This is when I'll join the debasement trade. When the euro's down here around 111, 110 and a half, because all of this has just been corrective. And we're just going to flush out everyone who's been talking about de-dollarization through this whole war. And the market's very crowded in things like the Aussie. The public's very long Aussie, very bearish a dollar. So I think that could be what's going to be behind Bitcoin pulling back. But I wanted to bring up a sleeper. I don't know if you guys trade it, but this is what I wanted to talk about was since the war, everyone that missed the WTI, they go, well, nat gas has to eventually kick in. So they've been trying for a few months, trying to bottom pick nat gas. That's a weekly. And you'll get a little bounce, and then this was the breakdown to me at 282, back over 282 is a signal. Lots of divergence, lots of frustration. This was our first, look at this. So I know people are sick of trying to buy it because we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks down before we got a positive candle. And I don't think many people are long. And this could be a sleeper. And nat gas has the ability to, make widows out of male traders and rich rich widows. Anyway, so I'm wondering if you have anything astrologically that might tie into something like this being a sleeper bottom that might be developing here.
Well,
If not, maybe look at it for next time.
Yeah, I have a little cycle that I could share on nat gas. I also have been keeping an eye on it. Let's see. Let me pull it up. Let's get this. Oh, no.
And while Margo's pulling that up, I'm no energy expert, but from what I do know, a good amount of natural gas, at least in the US, is coming from the flare off of rigs. And so, I'd be tracking oil export data, or if you get more countries that do bans on export and you have to have your domestic suppliers shut rigs down, because their
No
storage
room.
is full,
Yeah.
then that could take some of the supply of nat gas offline.
Yeah. I mean, I heard the same thing about wheat at the bottom last year. There's so much wheat. There's so much wheat, Dale. I don't know
Yeah.
how you like, right? So, I mean, these are the kind of things I like to hear when I'm, looking for divergences in a contrarian buy. It could still make another low, but it's on my radar. I actually took a small position in Boyle today, so
Okay.
I expect to be a frog.
Yeah, I trade Boyle when I'm trading nat gas. I've been watching this, and these are my two analogs that I've got, and those are based on Venus interval cycles, and they do track pretty well. You can see here's some past ones
Yeah,
here, so they do track pretty well. They're not tick for tick, but that's not the purpose of them. Their purpose is structure and direction, right?
right.
But where we're here is we're basically kind of at the decision point, and the reason I favor a low here. And then perhaps the green analog is because we're due for the 20-week cycle low. And the 20-week cycle low tends to run a little bit short. And I chart UNG, the ETF, because that's what I trade a lot.
Okay.
If I also trade Boyle sometimes, but this is kind of just what I've charted over all the years. So I'm running an 80-day, 20-week cycle, which is short, and a full 20-week cycle is 100 days. So we're in the time band for an 80-day to 100-day cycle low. So this is right here. This is one of Blair's tools from the time trade software. He calls it the white magic level. I call it the white fib level just because so many people ask me what it is. And it's based on fib spirals. So I kind of adopted my own nickname for it, which is the white fib level. If you see on my charts that they have a little WFL, that's what that is. Right. And these are really important levels. Price rarely gets above or below it on the first try. So we just tested it and we rejected it, Right. So that I'd like to see us hold here and maybe, either make a higher low or a double bottom. But we'll see, because of course the risk is that we just would keep breaking down, and that we could run a longer 100-day cycle, right? And
another month.
Yep. And the low would come in a little bit closer to June. So I think we're in the time band. The question is, how is price going to behave over the next little bit? That's what I'm watching on nat gas.
Thank you.
Yeah. As far as the dollar goes, because you talked a little bit about that too. Let's get a weekly on the dollar here. So like you said, I've been kind of bearish on the dollar because my analogs are tracking bearish analogs right now. And these are usually pretty reliable. So, it looks like we're tracking this light red one here, and that we may get some sideways to up action here, but it's all, for me, comes down to this level right here, $97.63 as far as our current performance in the current month.
Yeah. Double bottom there.
Yep. If we hold that, then we could go higher. If we lose that turns this, because this is the low of the 29-day cycle here. So if we lose that price level, that's going to turn this into a bearish cycle. And if that's a bearish cycle,
I agree.
That supports just further movement up of the risk on assets. And I do have a general upward bias. We've already seen such a strong move up in the U.S. equity markets with such little consolidation. I'm certainly not shorting it or betting against it in any way, shape, or form. Kind of like we talked about in the beginning of the episode. When you're in a bull market, you just look for buying opportunities. For me, at least, I don't like to short it when it's a strong bull. But this kind of goes back to like the overall like hot zones of astrology. And then I know Jared has some stuff to share on this too, because when we did our Discord webinar, the next hot zone of astrology falls around the new moon, starting around, it actually starts with the Mercury Cazimi on the 14th, and then the new moon on the 16th. And then we just kind of have back-to-back things going on with a few days apart until we hit the sun square the nodes on the 25th. And that is the midpoint between eclipse seasons. And it's really an important time in my work, because it is very highly correlated to my analog cycle disruptions. So these are analogs that I run, or any of the other cycles that I measure. They oftentimes get disrupted either by eclipse season or by sun square the nodes. And so I think all of my analogs are at risk of changing during that window. And the reason that it's because usually I would not give sun square the nodes such a powerhouse signature. Usually it would just be more like I'd be looking for disruptions and then carrying on. But we've got Uranus in orb of the sun for this event. Let's see if I can find my charts, the astrology charts. I've got a lot of windows open. There we go. So this is a really big event that I'm keeping an eye on. So on the 25th, we have Sun exactly square the nodes with Uranus 3-degree orb. And just a couple weeks later, June 12th, then Uranus will be at the bending of the nodes. And there's some fascinating research that's been done in astrology that actually links very clearly historical patterns to astrological events. And one of those things that is the most compelling research I've ever seen was by Carl Payne-Tobey, and it's about Uranus at the bending of the nodes, that's another way of saying Uranus square the nodes of the moon. And it's correlated to disasters, surprise, unexpected events in all areas, all domains, but specifically fires, even fires, natural disasters, escalation of conflict if it already exists. I actually did a whole spreadsheet on all of the Uranus square the node events since 1900, and it had 100% correlation with so many fascinating events, and disruptions in the financial market was one of them.
When's that window?
The complete sun square the nodes is on the 25th of May, and then the Uranus square the nodes is on the 12th of June. So we kind of enter this whole window of time where I think that volatility and disruption is really, likely. And it opens kind of around the new moon on the 16th and then extends into June.
So it's possible that my birthday party might get disrupted on the 27th because all my friends are going to be around to watch me blow out the candles. And, I want to make sure everyone has a good time.
Keep a fire extinguisher nearby.
Okay.
Yeah. And Margo, that's interesting you say if it's potentially the theme is kicking off around the 16th of what could lead to some disruption. Next week is a big week for potential catalysts from a macro perspective.
China. On
Monday the 11th, Congress is supposed to have its Fed chair nomination for Kevin Warsh. Powell's term as chair expires on Friday the 15th, which also happens to be U.S. stock option expiration day. And also, Trump and President Xi are supposed to meet on Thursday, Friday. Meanwhile, in the middle of your week, Tuesday, Wednesday, you've got CPI and PPI. So your two major inflation data points. So you've got quite the week of catalysts from the new Fed chair, the old Fed chair leaving, inflation, and then U.S. China trade talks on a week with options expiration into a new moon, and then continuing to the end of the month. So that'll be interesting to see what transpires. Also, fun fact, 10 of the last 13 Fed chairs in their first year, they saw an average drawdown in the S&P of 10%.
They get tested early.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the first day of Powell's chair term, S&P was down 4%.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and again, Kevin Warsh confirmation is not guaranteed. What happens if he is not confirmed? Then what happens? And obviously, even if he's confirmed, he still has to be voted by the other members of the FOMC board as the chair. And then ultimately, you still have the underlying issue of Jerome Powell is not leaving. So his seat, his term as a Fed governor goes until January of next year. If he decided to leave early, Trump can appoint someone new to the FOMC board. But if Powell's still around, what does that mean for the Fed? Meanwhile, we got four of the big largest central banks last week: Japan, FOMC, Bank of England, and ECB, and they all left rates unchanged because their hands are tied with stubborn inflation due to higher energy costs and labor market that hasn't broken down enough to justify more cuts. So interesting.
What did you make out of the intervention, guys? In the end, from 160.50, are they going to win this battle, or will the market come back and test the BOJ again? What do you think?
There were some interesting reports out today that according to the IFM rules, Japan could only intervene 2 more times between now and November, per the IMF. So, and they spent last week $34 billion in US dollar terms. Right. They got a 3.5% move down, but clearly it shows you Japan is committed defending the 160 level for now. But yeah, they don't have many bullets left to be in the market intervening. And also, we talked offline, they're using the future oil market as one of their tools to jawbone markets down, or at least their currency, strengthen their currency, via oil.
So, folks, I've got one more data point to add to that time frame. So I'll just this will be quick. I'll just steal the screen. Here. Right. So this is Margo's favorite indicator. It's called the ruler. Okay. So if you anchor the ruler to the October 29th high, and then measure it out to the March 30th low, that is 90 degrees of Mars heliocentric travel. Okay. So the next interesting degree of travel of Mars is over here, 120 on Monday, May 18th. So that just adds to the confluence that we're seeing around that, Friday the 15th, and then that subsequent week as an important week. There's both a lot of news events and a lot of astro events that land in that area. And then, of course, the week after, we've got the, what is it, Sun Square nodes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Dale.
I mean, that is parabolic, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And there's always a measurement. It's just, there's always a measurement that in hindsight, in the rearview mirror, can explain it. But I mean, the thing is, if you can spot it early enough after it goes parabolic, then you can say, okay, well, this is a logical extrapolation of that cycle. Next big cycle hit is 120 on May 18th. All right.
I mean, technically, the most logical thing that happens once we find a peak is that we attempt a weekly higher low and we see some, relatively healthy consolidation. We watch the 382 retrace, right? And we see if we hold it or we lose it. That's kind of how I look at the markets, But
we all know it's not going to make a V top, right? Like the stock market just does not do V tops, right? This isn't gold. So it'll probably indicate some sort of corrective action that's part of a broader dome that takes months to complete.
Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, I think my abridged version is that I'm looking to add ag and oil over the summer right now. That's kind of what, and sometime between June and July. I won't rule out the possibility that it could be wise to start looking in May, for at least maybe partial entries, but that's not where right now I'm long risk assets, various different rack of tickers that I've been picking. And I have a new channel in my Discord where I share some of my top conviction tickers and trade setups. And so I've just remained long has been my strategy, but of course I've been taking some partial profits. I like Dale, you've got the three Ps, right?
You got to take them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're assuming you're right 100% of the time.
Right. No, you take profit on the way up, and eventually you end up in a risk-free trade, and you can feel good about that, if you're looking to hold it for the longer term,
I'm looking at that time period that you're talking about in June, July to be a big buyer of metals and a big seller of the dollar.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what I'm looking at for that time period. Now, I think it'll be 4,000 or lower gold and silver in the 50s.
Well, that would be a great opportunity. We could talk about gold and silver real quick if we want,
Okay.
or we wrap it up.
Yeah, wrap it with.
And while you're doing that, I agree. I think caution is advised at this time because one thing we haven't talked about today is global yields, but specifically U.S. yields. The 30-year they're trying to keep it under 5%. The 10-year they're trying to keep at 4.4%. If those yields move higher, that creates a big problem for the U.S. Treasury market.
Yeah. That's what's behind the dollar pop to 101, 102, 103 is, 460 will be a big number on the 10-year. Okay, we're trading 440. But there are measurements up near 480, 5% on the 10-year. So
yes. So that would imply that supports the idea of a bond breakdown, basically, right?
That's what Hank Paulson put out that warning about a few weeks ago. They have some type of emergency measures ready for when the bid goes away. Now, there is a little divergence in TLT, but say, for example, we have a real strong number again in the employment. You look at the bonds and they've been gapping lower. Today they didn't, but about 2-3 days in a row, if you pulled up an intraday chart, they gap lower like 2-3 days. That's not healthy action. So maybe we'll get a rally. Looks like your analogs.
Well, here's my bonds forecast right now is that we should get a little recovery here for the next 2 weeks, and then before we break down. But again, keeping in mind,
look at that chart.
Huh?
Yeah, that's an ugly chart.
Yeah. And then these are the moves. I've got a really strong directional move due in Q3, Q4 of the year. So the question is, which way does it go? I think at some point bonds are going to recover, but not before they break down first, in my opinion, because we're due for this 29-month cycle low. And
When does that do?
Well, that was due in March of 2026, but a 29-month cycle gets a 4.8 month, or let's call it a 5-month orb. So 5 months either side of it, because the higher the time frame cycle, the wider the time band, right?
In the fall.
So the fall, that's when I think we get a low in bonds. And I think that's a buying opportunity for bonds in the fall. Of course, we'll assess.
That might be the top in risk.
Yeah.
Midterm elections in November.
Yeah. The midterm elections are very significant, and we have some pretty, I don't know if I want to call it concerning, relatively bearish astro. Just to be really, frank about it, when we get Venus and Mercury retrograde in Scorpio in the fall. And I've been kind of talking about that just briefly. I'm not going in depth on it just yet, but it's generally not a favorable time for the markets.
Right after the eclipse season.
Yeah, that time takes place in October. So it's interesting because that's going to be right around, it's October, November. I'd have to pull the exact dates up. I don't have it prepped right now, but it's right around midterm and elections. So you got to wonder if they're going to hold it up into the midterm, or if they're going to dump it before and then rally up out of it,
And Margo, how would you characterize the July astrology? I know a lot of tradition, there's a lot of big planetary aspects in July. How are you seeing that as positive or negative?
I don't have a positive or negative outlook on it just to state at the moment, but what really is there's a big event in July, and that's that the nodes are changing signs. I think we talked earlier about the business cycle a little bit, and there's work done by various different astrologers that have, Louise McWhirter is one of them, who has, I think she might have been the original one who correlated the business cycle to the nodal cycle. Now the nodes, for anybody who isn't familiar, they take about 18.6 years to make a complete cycle, full 360 degrees of longitude travel. And so when those nodes change signs every 30 degrees, you get kind of a different energy or shift that takes place. But Louise McWhirter was able to take I don't have any diagrams prepped for this, but she was able to take the nodal cycle transits through quadrants, let's call it quadrants or signs, but quadrants being like 2 to 3 signs of the zodiac, right? She was able to say, this is where we tend to see the high in the business cycle, and this is where we see the low in the business cycle. And the low tends to come around the North Node transiting the sign of Aquarius, which is what's about to happen in July. The North Node is going to move from Pisces into the sign of Aquarius. And so that doesn't necessarily mean it's a stock market cycle low, because the stock market doesn't always cycle with the business cycle exactly, right? But it does signal that it's likely that we're entering the phase of time where we're going to start to see weakness. And, there's so many things that could emerge, right? We've got the private credit potential risk crisis. We've got the wars emerging. I mean, I think there's any number of ways in which this could unfold, a sovereign debt crisis, any number of ways in which this could unfold to result in what I think will be a rough time for risk on assets between 2028 and 2029. And so in the meantime, I think we're just, making our way up there. But I guess that was a long-winded answer to what do I think of July. July is that nodal transition into the sign, the North Node Aquarius, South Node Leo. And I think that's a big transition.
If I just do my math and 2026 minus 18.6 years, that means the last time the nodes were, shifting was mid 2007.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
So we have similar nodal positioning as 2007 when the market topped before the GFC.
Yeah, the GFC top came in right in correlation with the nodes in Aquarius and Leo. It's not always that clean though. I mean, let's see here. I believe that I have this quick and handy. Let's see. Here we go. Here's the nodes. Let's put it on the monthly chart so we can see. So this is going to give you the nodes in Pisces, Virgo, and then Aquarius, Leo comes after that. So I've got a lot of other things on the chart because I wasn't prepping this for share. Let's see if I can quiet some of this stuff. And over here. There we go. Oh my gosh. Wow.
AI.
There we go. Okay. That's better. All right. So here we go. Here is the nodes through Aquarius Leo. Yeah, that was the GFC, like you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then here is the last time that happened before that. And it wasn't a GFC by any means, right? We did get a swift down move. We do tend to see swift down moves at some point in time in the transit, but really the major move came right before the node ingress Pisces, which is what we're in. Correct. And that's what we're in right now is the node transiting Pisces. And so like I was saying, Louise McWhirter kind of noted that it's almost like themes that shift as you move through not just one sign, but multiple signs, right? And so for me, I was looking at this North Node in Pisces, North Node through Aquarius zone when I was doing this research. So here's one, that was a swift down move in 1969 during the nodes transiting the sign of Pisces. And then the recovery actually came in Aquarius. So, and I could go on. I've looked at these all the way back to 1900. But typically the nodes through Aquarius is a pretty volatile time. It's not typically a straight up. There was that one event where we saw it was mostly up, but most of the time it's sideways, or we see this one 1914, and there are some correlations right now to 1914. We saw a huge move down right at the end of the nodes exiting Pisces into Aquarius, which is, well, that's where we're at right now, right? We're 2 months into that. I'm not necessarily saying this is what's going to happen. I'm just saying it's due. We're due to have a more significant drawdown than I think we've seen in a while at some point in time in the coming, 1 to 3 years.
Well, and I just mentioned
The lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I just use that as a reason to bring up Jem Carson's midterm election year analysis for the S&P during populist periods. So he looked at 1962 to 82, and during a midterm election year, from peak to the low of that year, you saw a drawdown at some point averaging 24%.
This is Paulson, his name is?
Jem Carson.
Oh, Jem. Okay.
Yeah,
I was
Jem
wondering,
Carson.
you brought him up. I'm wondering how he handled, a few months ago, we were going to be down but choppy. And then once it took out a certain area, it confirmed that the market was heading lower, which I'm sure we did when we broke 10%.
Mm-hmm.
And how did he handle his narrative when the market roared back to new all-time highs? Where does he stand now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not sure how he handled the narrative. Obviously, he's a options volatility fund manager, so he does most of his stuff in non-correlated option type activities and alternative strategies. But he was on an interview last week, and he just said that short term he is a little cautious on U.S. equities. Medium term, he's even more cautious. So he's somewhat cautious.
He's still cautious.
So he gets more
we
cautious
had
towards
this
the end of the year, into the midterms.
Oh, cautious into the midterms. Okay. Because
But yeah,
he's good.
but he also says that there is a good case to be made that you get a blow off top into the summer first before you see that big drawdown. So he is definitely open to that, and he's communicated that. But he does see caution advised, increasing into the midterm election.
You know what's a safe call for any market?
What's that?
It's going to be in a range.
Well, yeah, 70%.
We're have some range trade. That way you're always right.
Of the time you'll be right.
Yeah, it might be a megaphone where the ranges are expanding from high to low, but it's still a range.
Still a range.
Yeah. Blair liked that one. You've used it.
Oh, yeah. Can never be wrong, You can be wrong in this game. Actually, that's such a trap.
Great session. Another one in the books.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody. This has been great. We got a May ahead of us, and then we'll see everybody for June. Does everybody want to tell the viewers where you can be found?
Sure. I am at time-trades.com, where you can get access to the scripts that I showed on a 15-day trial.
Get it. You can find me on YouTube and in a Discord room with TradeGate Hub.
And on X again.
Oh, yes.
You're back?
There was a Lazarus.
You're resurrected.
You know what? As fast as it, in one day it disappeared with the letter and statement, and then it reappeared without anything. Just one day I was, opening up my laptop, and I have it pinned on top, and it said 2 notifications. And I go, well, what the heck is that? And there were 2 posts, and I looked at it, and it was like nothing ever happened. It was a little miracle. I was happy to do it because, the thing I like most about it is not, the adulation, but helping people and getting eyeballs on talented people, because I don't care who someone does business with. I just want them to find the best fit for themselves in their trading.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not easy.
I love it.
But,
yeah, I'm so back. Jared, where do we? Oh, sorry. Sorry, Blair.
We're glad you're back, Dale.
Thanks,
so
Blair.
glad. Seriously, I was so stoked. I think when Dale messaged me, I was I sent him a meme of joy.
Yeah, I was in shock. Yeah, it's nice.
And if
Sometimes,
anyone's looking for
sometimes
me,
you have to let go of things. I was going to bug the guy that was helping me. I said, he's trying to help me. They're sending letters. Just leave him alone. If it's meant to be, you'll get it back. People were trying to talk me into opening another one, and I said, no, I'm not going to open another one. Only this one if it comes back. And once I said, okay, we'll see what happens. It came back. Once I let go.
Yeah. There's a
yeah,
great book that I think is super relevant for trading as well. It's called Letting
Yeah,
Go by Dr. David Hawkins.
by
That's
life for life.
yeah,
Yeah.
indeed.
Well,
All
I
right,
always enjoy
Jared,
being with you
Jared,
guys.
Jared, where do we find you?
if anyone's looking for me, I'm inside the Trade Travel Chill community or Margo's Discord. Especially, I join her for AMAs.
And everybody can find me at my website, margoamala.com. You can follow me on X, or you can join my Discord or Patreon. All the links will be in the video description below. See you next time.
Cute.